Well, it's worth every verse, don't you think? It's a wonderful text. And there are so many things in this text, and I can't touch upon many of them. But I would suggest that you spend some time with it and that you read it to yourself. Just the act of reading and concentrating on one good long story in the Bible at one time is such a deep and enriching thing to do. And I want to talk a little bit about what Rachel raised with the children. I've thought a long time about, over the years, about why Jesus was weeping at that time, and that was if you wanted to have memory verses for the Bible, that was the one everybody chose. Jesus wept. I've got one, and when I was growing up, we had to memorize. Well, we didn't have to, but we had contests about memorizing verses, and people kept track of how many they knew, and that was one that everybody had on their list. Now, why would Jesus weep when he knew that Lazarus was going to be raised? Was he weeping because the people just didn't understand him? They didn't understand what was going on? At the end of, this is the end of the first part of the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John is divided into two parts. The first is the book of signs, and the second is the book of glory. And the raising of Lazarus is the last of the signs. It doesn't talk about miracles, it talks about signs. So these actions of Jesus were signs that the Messiah had come into the world. It was a sign that if you had eyes to see and ears to hear, you could understand. And this is the last one. Even his own betrayal and possibility of death did not keep him from going back to Judea, even though they had just threatened to stone him. These people are completely unable to hear exactly what's happening. Rachel mentioned last week that there is a lot of confusion in the Gospel of John. The people just don't get it. And three different groups of people say, if you had just been here, our brother would not have died. Or the Jewish friends of Mary said if he had just been here, he would not have died. And it misses the point altogether. But even his own betrayal and death in the gospel of glory are ways in which God is glorified. So his enemies have nothing that they can do to stop the glorification of Christ. They use every weapon at their disposal. They use betrayal. They use violence. God's glory will not be denied even when Jesus is denied. God's glory will not be betrayed even when Jesus is betrayed. So then why is Jesus so deeply moved? And why does he weep? Perhaps a part of it is because of their unbelief, because he is grieving that they just don't believe. But I think it is simply because, as Rachel said, he felt the pain. He experienced the grief that people had. And to have someone who knows us this well and who knows our grief and pain is priceless. William Blake said, "Think not thou canst sigh a sigh, and thy Maker is not by. Think not thou canst weep a tear, and thy Maker is not near. Oh, he gives to us his joy, that our grief he may destroy. Till our grief is fled and gone, he doth sit by us and moan." Beth and I have been singing the Brahms Requiem this week. We practiced Tuesday, Wednesday, we sang it Thursday and Saturday, and some of you were there and we're glad that you could hear it. It opens with, in the German, it opens with the words, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they will be comforted." And then it goes to Psalm 126. "They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. They that go forth and weep, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing." So this requiem, unlike so many requiems, does not focus on the idea that the dead need to be prayed for because God is angry. No, it talks about those who are living, those who are mourning, those who are weeping. It is a very compassionate requiem. And sometimes when I'm singing, although the requiem keeps you busy, I try to look at the audience to see if people are manifesting on their faces that the music is touching them in some way, whether they are weeping too, whether they are remembering those that they have lost or other losses in their lives, not just of people who have died, and whether the music out of its beauty and consolation is touching them, not only connecting with their grief, but also giving them a sense of joy. But there's a lot more into this passage, of course, than Jesus wept. There is, in fact, the fact that Jesus went back into the face of his own death, where he had been threatened, in order to rescue and heal and raise his dearly beloved friend Lazarus. There's all, as I say, this misunderstanding. There is, in fact, at the end, this loud shout, "Lazarus, come out!" And I've been thinking about the place of words and how they manifest God's will in our lives. How can words bring about life? Was it necessary for Jesus to shout, "Lazarus, come out," for him to come out? And that gets me to Ezekiel. This amazing passage that Ignacio read so beautifully. Ezekiel is prophesying in Babylon, and he's prophesying after his beloved Israel has been run over by mighty empires, caught between the empires of Egypt in the west and first Assyria, then Babylonia in the east, and finally defeated. Jerusalem was laid siege, the temple was destroyed, the wall was torn down, people died of starvation because of the siege. The whole nation of Israel was destroyed. And here is Ezekiel prophesying in the midst of this grim reality, standing in a field and envisioning whether it was an actual field where the bones of those who had fought in a war were located, or whether it was a vision of his, we don't know, envisioning these bones. And then God tells him to do a ridiculous thing, to talk to the bones and to prophesy to them and to say, "Hear the word of the Lord, and I will breathe life into you, and I will cause flesh to come upon you, and I will cause bone to come together with its bone and sinews to develop." And can you imagine the ridiculous thing that is? To prophesy to the bones. And as he prophesies, he begins to see the very words that he spoke come to being. And I'm wondering about the speaking of the word. And I'm wondering whether we are called in a way to prophesy the new life that God envisions in us, and to say it out loud, even if it seems completely ridiculous, even if it seems completely impossible. I think it is. Now, some of you are old enough to remember I Love Lucy, and those of you who aren't have heard about it. Lucy was married to Desi, and Desi was Cuban, and his English was, let's say, creative. And every so often there would be a set two between them, like almost every show. And Desi would say to Lucy, "You got some splaining to do. We got some prophesying to do." We have the task, I believe, by the use of our words and our gestures, to help God bring about the new life that God intends for individuals, for Emmanuel, for Rochester, for the nation, and for the world. We got some prophesying to do. And perhaps our word to one another should be exactly the word that Jesus spoke to Lazarus. "Lazarus, come out. Rachel, come out." She already has. But we're all in the process. "Richard, come out. Kathleen, come out." This is our word to each other. And so we keep calling each other out into the full reality, the full creation that God intends for us. And we call one another out in many ways. Just as we are giving the passing of the peace, Ayana gave me this little cross. Like she's saying, "Come out, Pastor Dick. Come out." I did a workshop with Jimmy and Joy on the Enneagram. It's a way to try to understand yourself. I don't have it all figured out yet, you know. And so we're in the process of coming out. We're in the process of being created in the image of God. We're in the process of discovering our gifts. And then someone steals our computer, right? And then we lose 2 or 3 months worth of work. Or we lose all our business records. And the community around us keeps saying, you can do it. Come out. We're with you. And some miracles happen because of these disasters, and the community's knit together in a new way. Bone comes to bone, and flesh appears on the bones, and sinews develop, and this new creation that God is creating here happens. And it happens in ways you can never anticipate or expect. And then we're coming out, we're doing well, and then we fall down. And we fall backwards, and we make a mistake, and the community stays by us, and the community says, you can do it. Come on out. I've been reading the book Einstein's God, and in it there is a testimony of a professor of surgery from Yale. And he believes, he doesn't talk about God, he talks about nature. He loves the natural restorative power in nature. And so he says, I'm nature's corner man. You know the corner man in the boxing ring? When the boxer between rounds has been battered and needs somebody to dress the wound and somebody to give him water and wipe his face off and cheer him on, he says, that's what I do. That's what I do with my patients. I cheer them on. And I'm the corner man, and I get the impediments out of the way, and then I just watch the natural power within them arise. We have some prophesying to do, it seems to me. We need to lift up our voices because the Lord is near. The Lord is here. I've run into a quote also from that same book by Krista Tippett, ascribed to Plato. He says, be kind to everyone you meet, because everybody is fighting a hard battle. It makes me even want to love my enemies. Last Sunday night, 60 Minutes had one of the very best segments I've ever seen on that program. It's about a woman's work in Harlem in New York. Vi Higginson, who is a New York radio personality and a theater producer, started a program called Gospel for Teens. And she wanted not to save the teens, but to save the music, because teens grow up with hip-hop and they don't know the gospel tradition. And so she auditions young people every fall to sing gospel. And she has a powerful staff of people who are mentors and who teach the kids how to sing gospel. And people come in from all the boroughs of New York in order to audition for this gospel for teens. Somebody named Yolanda Howard came in from the Bronx, and someone named Rhonda Rodriguez, a 16-year-old Gabby Francois came in from also the South Bronx. And Gabby wore a scarf over her head. And there was something about Gabby that they couldn't quite understand, because she could sing beautifully, but then she would check out. She would chew gum. She would slouch. She would not look you in the eye. And at the beginning of their rehearsals, after they chose the 42 students, they would always shake their hands and they'd stomp their feet. And Vi Higginson said, we have to leave everything behind, everything that we brought in, all our concerns about our home, all our concerns about our family, all that's been going difficult in our lives. We have to leave it behind so that we can do the music. And they shook it out. And these kids learned in 3-part harmony. In 2 hours, they learned 3 gospel songs. They were dynamite. These kids were amazing. They entered a contest for the first time, a gospel singing contest, and they won. You've got to check this out on the internet. A few weeks later, Vi found herself having to coach the students in a very unusual way. to say their names. The kids could not say their names. Some of them could not, with boldness or certainty, even say who they were. And Gabby had had the scarf on her head in order to hide. They went to Gabby's house and they found out that Gabrielle was not being raised by her mother or her grandmother, but her grandmother's mother. And Gabrielle's parents, she didn't know her father. She'd only met her mother. Her mother dropped in and out of her life a few times. And then Yolanda, her father finally showed up a year before for the first time in her life. And she had a wonderful meeting with him. He said, "I'll be back on Sunday and we'll go to the movies." But of course, he never came back. That was a year before. And so Yolanda wrote a song about her dad. Even though a man, I know you, I suppose. Even though I kind of miss you, that I know. Oh, Daddy, Daddy, Father, where were you when I needed you the most? Daddy, Daddy, Father, where were you and where are you now? The kids learned to sing out their pain. They were encouraged all the time by Vi, who said, "You can say your name. You can do it." The choir has a theme song. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you're anything less than beautiful. And Gabrielle sang that song. She volunteered to sing that song. David Moses, one of the young people, comes from a very stable family. They always have dinner together, they pray together, they sing gospel together in their home. But one day his cousin was shot in a drive-by shooting. And so Vi broke her own rule and she invited all the problems to come in to the meeting. And she asked, "How many of you have lost someone recently?" And the vast majority of the hands went up. And then she asked David to sing about his cousin, and he sang it out. She said, "The first right granted to African Americans in this country is the right to sing." And so the spring concert rocked the house. And at the end, Vi invited everybody to introduce themselves, and one by one, they shouted their names, and they said where they were from. And it came even to Gabrielle Francois, and she shouted her name, "Gabrielle Francois, Bronx, New York." That was prophecy. She was calling them into being. And the music was doing that too. So we need to lift up our voices in 1,000 ways and always call one another into being. If you see something that's offered by a member of the congregation, a member of the community that means a lot to you, tell them. Don't be silent. If something appears in the newsletter that you love, tell them. Don't be silent. One of my new friends on Facebook is a guy named Taylor Schmidt, and he has a long story, but he's 21 years old at Kansas State University, and he put this on his Facebook page yesterday. Taylor Schmidt wasn't born a patriot, a warrior, a king, but rather a son and servant in deep connection to the loving, living God and to the world he tenderly shaped. Agape.